Shalom and welcome back to Israel with Aline. We are at the top of the Mount of Olives, and as you can see, this is a peaceful and quiet place. The most impressive view of Jerusalem is from this place. However, according to biblical prophecies, this place will not remain peaceful forever, because this is the stage for the beginning of the end times. We will walk through the Mount of Olives, enter the tomb of the prophets, and finish in the valley of Jehoshaphat to try to understand why God chose this place. Shulufa, if you are ready, let's get started. Now let's begin our descent, and we will follow exactly the same path that Jesus took during his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. This happened on the Sunday before Easter Sunday. Jesus was here at the top of the Mount of Olives, and he got on a little white donkey. And then he begins his descent until he enters through the Golden Gate, which is right here in front of us. And there's no way to walk this path without remembering the words of the prophet, as it is written in Zachariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king comes to you, righteous and Savior, humble, riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Walking on the Mount of Olives is to see the past, the present, and also the future of humanity, of the biblical prophecies. And thousands of people do this every day. However, what many people don't know is that while they are walking this path here, talking about the prophecies, this entrance often goes unnoticed. This is the entrance to the tomb of the prophets. I have a slightly different feeling being in this place. We really are having a great privilege. The priest, who is the guardian of this place, just opened it for us. And he's here now, lighting the candles and turning on the lights, because when we come in, it's completely dark. A place that has around 2,500 years of history. This is a funerary complex. Here we can see 50 tombs, 3 of them belonging to biblical prophets, which we will see soon. But over the centuries and centuries of this place's history, many more than 50 people have been buried here. It is estimated that many hundreds and perhaps even thousands of people have been buried in this complex over time. Why? Because they specifically chose this place due to the importance of the Mount of Olives, of the prophets, but not of them as people, not their bones, but rather the importance of what they said, the Word of God. And that's why all the people buried here wanted to be as close as possible to the fulfillment of the prophecies here on the Mount of Olives. So let's go in and see the place. And the walls here are full of inscriptions from different periods and also in different languages. But one that really catches my attention is this one. It's written in Greek, and it's at least about 1,500 years old. It's written here. Rejoice, no one lives forever. Something really interesting to put next to your grave. This place was never really lost. Its existence was always known. However, due to the total darkness here without the lights, which are, by the way, new, many details went unnoticed. And only a few months ago, the guardian of this place realized what is here. There is a fresco, a painting from the Byzantine period, which is the first Christian period in the Holy Land. Here there is a figure drawn. It is very damaged, so we don't know exactly who was depicted here. But looking at the context, one thing becomes very clear. That this place right here was a place of Christian worship. There is a kind of table, a platform, and a space that had something like an arch. It may be that originally this was some kind of tomb, but over time it was turned into a Christian altar. This used to function as a catacomb, like a secret church. I mean, the first Christians in the Holy Land couldn't worship freely because of the persecutions by the Romans, and that's why many times they chose secret and underground places. So this was a place of Christian worship since the first Christian period in the Holy Land, and even at the time, probably during the persecutions. And that's why this fresco is part of this altar. And here on this wall in front, we see several crosses carved into the stone. Wow. This place is amazing. The ancient tradition accepted by both Jews and Christians is that this rock-cut tomb belonged to Haggai, the biblical prophet. Here we can see a place to lay the body, so we believe that the prophet Haggai was placed here. And after a year had passed, people came here and removed Haggai's bones from this place and placed them in a masefa, a place for collecting bones. And this is exactly where I am now. This area here was where the bones were collected. Don't worry, guys, I'm not stepping on top of the prophets, on top of people for any reason at any point in history that we don't know. When someone, a group of people or some organization came here and took all the bones from the place, that's why when we say that we are at the prophet's tomb, we are at his tomb, but we don't know where his bones are. And if we continue with the archaeology of this place, we see a tomb next to it, but it has a very different construction. It doesn't have this deep part because this tomb is later than that one. This is the tomb of the prophet Malachi. This is the burial cave of Haggai and Malachi. And there is one more prophet who may be buried here, who is our topic for today. Let's go. We can see here another tomb that's different from the others. The others have a round entrance, and this one suddenly has a square entrance. Maybe it already allowed for some kind of lid to protect this tomb. But the clue is that there's a name written here. It's written here in Hebrew, Zachariah, which means Zachariah. Tradition says that this is the tomb of the prophet Zachariah. We can't be sure that this Zachariah is the same prophet that we know to this day. But regardless of whether this is his tomb or not, the words of Zachariah have survived to this day. And part of his prophecies have already been fulfilled and others are yet to be fulfilled. So let's leave the tomb of the prophets to learn more about their words and their connection to the Mount of Olives. Here we can see more tombs. The entire western side of the Mount of Olives is a large Jewish cemetery that is 3,000 years old. There isn't just the tomb of the prophets here, we can see hundreds of thousands of tombs here. The oldest ones are further down in the valley. For example, the tomb of the Pharaoh's daughter, a 3,000-year-old tomb carved into the rock for the Pharaoh's daughter, who was one of King Solomon's wives. But why did they turn such a beautiful place with such a privileged view into a huge cemetery? Wouldn't it make more sense to build homes here? Why has this place been a cemetery for 3,000 years? There are several reasons. There's a simple and practical reason. Jews need to be buried outside the walls, and here we can clearly see the city walls. So this was a place where it was allowed to be buried, but not only was it allowed, people wanted to be buried here. On the Mount of Olives, between the Mount of Olives, the Kidron Valley, and the city walls, mainly because of the biblical prophecies. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, when your spoil will be divided in your midst. O Jerusalem, for I will gather all the nations for battle against Jerusalem. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem to the east. The Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley. Half of the mountain will move to the north and the other half to the south. You will flee through my valley between the mountains, because this valley will reach Azal. Yes, you will flee, just as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the saints will come with him. On that day there will be no light, but cold and ice. It will be a unique day, a day known to the Lord. On that day the Lord will be one, and his name will be one. The people who are buried here consider this place as a kind of box seat for the end of times. They want to be the first here to witness these great events, the splitting of the Mount of Olives, the dead coming out of their tombs. Everything just as it's described in the Bible. And also, just a few meters down here, there's a valley. This valley is called by different names, like the Valley of the Kings, the Kidron Valley. But the main name connected to the end times is the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Now let's get to know the place of the judgment of the nations. This is the Valley of Jehoshaphat, or as we call it in Hebrew, Yoshaphat, which means God will judge. This name is closely connected to the prophecy of Joel 3. And as we walk here, I want us to read verse by verse. Yes, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the peoples and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There. I will judge them there because of my inheritance, Israel, my people. For they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land among themselves. Joel says that all the nations of the world will be called to the valley of Jehoshaphat. But in the following verses, he highlights 3 places: Tyre, Sidon, and Philistia. Tyre and Sidon are what we now call Lebanon. And Philistia was the region of the Philistines where the Gaza Strip is located today. What do you have against me, Tyre, Sidon, and all the regions of Philistia? Are you paying me back for something I did to you? If you are trying to take revenge on me quickly and swiftly, I will take revenge for what you have done. Rise up, nations, advance to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the neighboring nations. Guys, look at what comes out of the prophet's mouth. God will sit in the valley of Jehoshaphat to judge the nations. And that's why this valley is also known as its nickname, as the valley of the judgment of the nations. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon will grow dark, and the stars will no longer shine. When we read the Bible, when we hear these verses, we need to remember and understand that they are talking about real places, about physical locations. We are now walking in the valley of Jehoshaphat, where so many things will happen. And also nothing is by chance, nothing is a coincidence. When we are here, every object around us, every biblical passage here is connected. For example, what we see here behind us at this moment is the famous pillar of Absalom. Furthermore, we also find here many ancient tombs, including those of priests from the Temple of Jerusalem. Everything is connected. See that the valley of Jehoshaphat is here in the middle. On one side, we see the Mount of Olives, where Jesus made his triumphal entry, Zechariah 9:9, and also Zechariah 14. And on the other side, we see the old city of Jerusalem, where the temple used to be. And also the Golden Gate, which is right here beside me, which is currently closed. But the prophecies also speak about its future reopening. And here in the midst of them, the judgment of the nations. We are now beside the monument of Zechariah. Which Zechariah is this? Probably not Zechariah the prophet. We saw his probable tomb much further up the mountain. We're also not sure that this is Zechariah. Some people connect this place, this monument, with Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. But it's just a theory. What we do know is that this was a monument next to the tomb of a person who lived here in the time of Jesus. When we talk about the end times, what comes to most people's minds is probably the battle of the Valley of Armageddon, which is proposed. It's yet another real physical place here in the Holy Land. Megiddo, the biblical city of Armageddon, was found, and the valley around it remains empty to this day. However, when we read the Bible in depth, we understand that the end times are not a single event, but rather a series of connected events, different phases. And if we read the Bible, we understand that the story of the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the judgment of the nations, probably comes before the events of the Valley of Armageddon. So here is a stop that comes before there. I can't tell you exactly when all of this will happen, the exact order and its details. But what we can do is base ourselves on the most important text we have, which is the Bible. And that's exactly what I wanted to do with you today. To walk through this same valley and hear the same words spoken by the prophets, by Zachariah on the Mount of Olives, and by Joel here in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. So even though we don't yet understand all these complexities, we are now in a peaceful place. For those who don't know the biblical story, it might even go unnoticed. There are so many beautiful things around us here, the Golden Dome as well, which you can see from here. However, for those who read the Bible deeply, they understand that this simple valley, which nowadays is so peaceful, a great judgment will take place here, and this will probably be the beginning of the end times. I hope you enjoyed learning a little more about the complex history of this place. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a like, and I'll see you next week.